It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of afternoon that should have been forgettable. Emily had decided we needed a new rug for the hallway. Nothing was wrong with the old one, she just said it felt old, whatever that meant. So we ended up in this boutique store across town, one of those hipster places that sells handcrafted candles for $40 and rugs that look like they were stolen from a retired yoga instructor's basement. I wasn't even paying attention at first. I was walking behind her, arms crossed, just following her lead like always, letting her do her thing while I pretended to care about the texture of recycled cotton blends. She was laughing with the cashier about something, and I caught the sound of her voice, light, playful, kind of flirtatious. I looked up from my phone, expecting to see her doing her usual polite smile, the one she used with waiters and customer service people. But what I saw wasn't that. What I saw was the kind of smile you don't give to strangers unless they already know something about you. A smile that curved too naturally, that hung on her face just a little too long. The man she was talking to wasn't the cashier, either. He was standing next to the counter, maybe mid-30s, tall, unshaven, wearing one of those smug art teacher beanies. I thought maybe he was just some guy waiting for his girlfriend or something. But then I watched her body language. She reached out and touched his arm, lightly, like she was brushing off a piece of lint that didn't exist. He laughed, nodded at something she said, and then looked over at me. And he didn't flinch. He didn't look away like a man caught in something. He smiled too, just a small twitch of his lips like he was in on a joke I didn't know about. I walked up to them. Emily turned to me, still smiling, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Oh, Matt," she said. "This is Dylan. He used to work with Becca. Small world, right?" I nodded slowly, shaking his hand, gripping harder than I needed to, feeling the way his fingers resisted just slightly, like he was sizing me up. I didn't say anything beyond "nice to meet you," and Emily turned back to the rug on the table as if the moment had passed. But my mind didn't move on with her. My eyes watched the way her body leaned slightly toward him, the way she laughed again at something he muttered, and most of all, the way she didn't introduce me as her husband. That ride home, she didn't say much, just played some indie playlist from her phone and hummed along. I stared out the passenger window, replaying that moment over and over in my head, chewing on it like it was a piece of tough meat I couldn't swallow. So, I finally asked, trying to sound casual, "How does he know Becca again?" She said without looking up from the road. "Dylan, you said he worked with her?" "Oh, yeah, at the marketing firm. Ages ago, I think. I didn't know he was still in the city." The lie was so effortless, it almost fooled me. But not quite. Because Emily had never mentioned to Dylan before. Becca had. A couple of times. Once in a weird way that didn't make sense until now. I didn't say anything else. Just nodded, pretending like I was satisfied with that. But in my mind, I was already pulling on the thread, and I could feel it tugging at something larger, something hidden under the fabric of everything I thought was solid. That night, I couldn't sleep. She lay next to me, her breathing steady, her body turned away. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about that smile. It wasn't mine. It hadn't been for me in a long time. And I was finally starting to notice. I didn't plan it. That's important to understand. I didn't sit down and think, today's the day I find out if my wife is sleeping with another man. It wasn't a movie moment or some dramatic hunch I followed through a rainy night. It was an accident, pure and simple. But accidents don't just happen without a setup, and mine started 2 days after the rug store incident, when Emily told me she was going to a pottery class with Becca. The mention of Becca's name, right after she'd name-dropped her at the boutique, triggered something in my mind. I didn't ask any questions, just nodded while she pulled on her coat and said she might be late. I watched her from the couch as she checked herself in the mirror, fixed a strand of hair, and sprayed something I'd never seen her use before. That smell, it was sharp, unfamiliar, something she'd picked up recently. I remember thinking it didn't smell like her, and that bothered me more than I expected. I sat there for a while after she left, staring at the blank television screen, not even pretending to be interested in anything. I wasn't even angry yet. I was confused. I didn't know where the line was between paranoia and instinct. But I also knew I didn't want to sit on the couch like a chump while she maybe wasn't where she said she was. That thought alone pushed me to my feet. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. Then I remembered the community center near the old library, the one where she'd taken yoga classes last year. That's where they had pottery night classes. It was a guess, but it was better than nothing. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw maybe 10 cars. I recognized Becca's blue Civic right away. So far, so good. But Emily's car wasn't there. I double-checked, thinking maybe I'd missed it. But no, her car was nowhere in that lot. I stood there for a full minute, engine idling, staring out at that row of vehicles, counting them again. Becca was here. Emily wasn't. I didn't know what to do with that. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, and for a second, I thought maybe I should just go home, forget it, pretend she got a ride or parked somewhere else. But that felt like giving up on something I hadn't even fought for yet. So I did something I wasn't proud of. I got out of the car and walked up to the building. I didn't go inside. I just waited by the door until I saw people coming out. It took about 15 minutes before the class ended. People started filing out, carrying their lopsided creations, laughing and chatting. Then Becca walked out, alone. She didn't look around like she was waiting for anyone. She headed straight to her car and drove off. I watched her taillights disappear and realized Emily had lied. She wasn't at pottery class. She wasn't with Becca. She was somewhere else. I got back in my car and sat there for a while. Then I drove around. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I wasn't ready to go home. I passed by a few places she liked, cafes, bars, that bookstore with the overpriced wine. Nothing. Finally, I stopped at a red light and saw her car. It was parked half a block down on a residential street near a row of older apartment buildings. I pulled over immediately, killed my lights, and just stared at it. Her car. There was no doubt. Same dent on the rear bumper from when she backed into the mailbox 2 years ago. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't go pounding on doors or peeking through windows. I just sat there for almost an hour. Nobody came out. I didn't see her. Eventually, I saw a light go on in a second-story window. A man stepped into view, shirtless, carrying a drink. Then he turned, and I saw her. Emily, laughing at something he said. Barefoot, hair tied back, holding what looked like the same drink. That was it. That was the moment. I didn't feel anything right away. I expected rage or pain or something loud inside me, but there was nothing. Just a kind of numb, quiet confirmation that made my whole body feel heavy. I watched for another 2 minutes, long enough to see her kiss him. Long enough to know it wasn't a mistake. Then I drove home, windows down, not because I wanted air, but because the silence inside the car was unbearable. She walked in 3 hours later. Said traffic was crazy and Becca wanted to stop for a drink. I asked her how the class was. She said they worked on glazing techniques. She even mimed the motion with her hands. I nodded, smiled, and told her I was heading to bed. I didn't sleep, though. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, humming something under her breath. She climbed into bed and curled up next to me like nothing had changed. But it had, and I was done pretending I didn't know. I didn't bring it up the next day, or the day after. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to be ready. I needed the words to come out the way I wanted them to, not like some emotional explosion I'd regret later. I watched her closely during those 2 days, the way she poured her coffee, how she asked about my day like nothing had changed, how she kissed me on the cheek before heading to work. That kiss felt like someone else's routine. I kept playing the scene back in my head, the one with her and that man in the window, the easy way she smiled at him, how comfortable she looked in his space. I didn't know his name, and I didn't care. Knowing it wouldn't make it hurt less. What mattered was that she gave something to him that used to be mine. On the 3rd day, I woke up before her and made breakfast. That used to be my thing, Sunday breakfast. It was a small tradition we had back when things felt more solid between us. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, rubbing her eyes, and stopped when she saw the table. I'd made coffee, toast, eggs, the usual. Wow, she said, smiling. This is unexpected. I nodded and slid a plate toward her. We ate in silence for a minute, the only sound being the occasional clink of a fork against the plate. She was scrolling on her phone, as always. I let her finish her toast before I said anything. I saw you, I said without raising my voice. I followed you the other night. You weren't at pottery class. Her fingers stopped moving. She didn't look up right away, just stared at the screen for a second longer, then slowly put the phone down next to her plate. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice lacked confidence. You were in that guy's apartment, I said. 2nd floor. I saw you through the window. I sat in my car and watched you laugh with him. I saw you kiss him. Her mouth opened slightly like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. She closed it again, looked down at her hands on the table, then finally looked up at me. You shouldn't have followed me, she said, and I laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. Just a dry, exhausted kind of reaction to how completely insane that response was. That's your takeaway? I asked. Not the fact that you've been lying to me, That you've been sleeping with someone else behind my back, but that I followed you?" She exhaled hard through her nose, like she was trying to keep herself from crying or screaming, maybe both. "It's not what you think," she said, and that made me laugh again, harder this time. "You're right," I said. "I didn't think it would be with some guy you smile at like he's your damn soulmate. I didn't think it would happen in some shitty apartment while I was at home thinking you were at pottery class. I didn't plan for this to happen," she said. "It just—" "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't say it just happened. People don't fall into affairs by accident. You made choices, Emily. You made a lot of them. Every text, every visit, every lie, those were all decisions." She pushed her chair back and stood up, pacing around the kitchen like she needed to move to keep from unraveling. I watched her as she crossed her arms over her chest, biting her lip like she was still trying to figure out what lie might work. "Matt," she said finally, "I didn't sleep with him." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Do you want me to believe that?" I asked. "Because I won't. And it doesn't even matter at this point. You were there. You lied to me. You kissed him. You stayed." Her face twisted into something I didn't recognize. It was part guilt, part defensiveness, and maybe part anger that I had cornered her with the truth she couldn't avoid anymore. "You stopped paying attention," she snapped. "You stopped asking how I felt. You stopped trying. You just let things drift. And that's your excuse?" I asked. "You couldn't talk to me, so you went and found someone else?" "I tried," she said. "But you never listened. You always changed the subject or acted like everything was fine." "I thought it was," I said, quieter now. "I thought we were just in a routine. I didn't know that meant you were slipping away. I didn't plan to fall for anyone," she said, softer now, sitting back down. "It just felt nice to be wanted." I stared at her for a long time. This woman I had shared a decade with. This woman who used to be my best friend, my partner. I didn't recognize her anymore. "So what now?" I asked. "Are you going to keep seeing him?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I didn't say much for the rest of that day. After she admitted she didn't plan to stop seeing him, something inside me shut down. Not in a dramatic way. Not with shouting or throwing things. I just stopped talking. I nodded, stood up, and left the room. I needed to be alone, and thankfully, she didn't follow me. She didn't ask where I was going or what I was thinking, which told me more than any apology ever could. I spent the night in the guest room, door locked, mind racing with possibilities. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to cry in front of her. What I needed was control. What I wanted was something that would make her feel the shift in power. Not in a childish way. Not to scare her. But so she would understand the weight of what she had done, not just the betrayal, but the sheer arrogance of continuing the affair after getting caught. The next morning, I got up early and acted like nothing had happened. I made coffee, cleaned the kitchen, even asked if she wanted anything from the store. She gave me a strange look, but didn't question it. She probably thought I was cracking or trying to smooth things over, maybe even forgive her. That was fine. Let her believe whatever made her feel safe. She still had no idea I'd seen more than just a kiss. After she left for work, I went through her closet and grabbed every expensive piece of clothing I had ever bought for her. Every designer bag, coat, pair of boots. It all went into trash bags. Not to throw out, but to sell. I listed them all online. Half price for quick sales. The responses came fast. Within hours, people were driving over, handing me cash, leaving with pieces of her curated image. I didn't stop there. I went into our shared office and copied every personal photo she had stored on our external drive. I left out anything private, anything with nudity. I wasn't looking to humiliate her like that. This wasn't revenge porn. This was just insurance. I backed everything up, then wiped her folder from the shared drive. I moved all my files onto my personal laptop and disconnected the backup system. From now on, we weren't sharing anything. Not photos, not passwords, not even storage. When she got home, she didn't notice anything different. I acted normal, polite, even. I asked her about her day, handed her the remote, let her pick the show. She was visibly uncomfortable, like she expected a trap. But I didn't give her one. I waited 3 days. 3 long, quiet days where I did everything just the way she liked it. Cleaned up after dinner, folded the laundry, even brought her tea at night. She started to relax. She started to think maybe the worst had passed. That Friday night, I told her I was going out with some friends from work. That part was true. What I didn't tell her was that I had already talked to one of our mutual friends, Andrew, someone who had always been close to both of us. I told him everything. He was shocked, angry for me, but also honest. He'd suspected something for a while. He agreed to help me with what I had in mind. We met up at a bar where a few other friends were hanging out. I made sure to take pictures. Group shots. Smiles. Drinks. I sent a few to Emily, just enough to plant a seed. I knew how her mind worked. I knew she'd analyze every face in the photo, every detail in the background. I stayed out late, later than usual, and came back smelling like beer and someone else's perfume, courtesy of Andrew's girlfriend, who was happy to help with the plan. Emily was waiting when I got home. She was in bed, pretending to sleep, but I saw her eyes shift when I walked in. I undressed silently, got into bed without a word, and let the tension thicken. The next day, I got a text from the guy. Dylan. I had managed to clone her SIM card using a backup service she'd forgotten was still synced to our cloud. I could see everything he sent. That morning, he texted her about the night they had just spent together, which was interesting, since she had supposedly been home all night while I was out. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I already had enough. I went to our bank and opened a separate account. Moved half the money. I froze our shared credit card, reported unusual activity. All legal. All within my rights. She called me that afternoon while I was out. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to her confused message, her voice shaky, unsure if she was being hacked or robbed. I waited until dinner. What's going on with the bank? She asked as I poured myself a drink. I moved my money, I said. You're on your own now. You can't just. I can, I cut her off. And I did. She stood there for a moment, stunned. Then she stormed out of the kitchen. I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. I wasn't going to comfort her confusion. That was hers to carry. She spent the next few days pretending not to notice how much had changed. She still made dinner once or twice like nothing was wrong, still sat across from me at the table with that polite smile she used to reserve for strangers. I didn't ask where she went in the evenings, and she didn't offer explanations. I knew she wasn't meeting girlfriends. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore. It was routine. We were two people occupying the same space out of habit, like employees stuck in the same office long after liking each other had stopped being part of the job. I waited until I was sure she wouldn't try to talk about it on her own. Then, I told her we needed to have a real conversation. Not over dinner, not in passing while brushing our teeth. I asked her to sit down in the living room, and I didn't sugarcoat it. This marriage is over, I said, without raising my voice. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. She stared at me like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak right away. When she finally did, the first thing she said wasn't about regret or guilt. It was a question. So, you're really doing this? She asked. You're walking away from everything? No, I replied. You did that already. I'm just following the path you laid out. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes scanning my face like she was looking for a crack in my expression. I made a mistake, she said. I didn't mean for things to go this far. You did mean it, I said. You meant every night you lied to me. Every plan you made to be with him. You meant to keep me in the dark. You meant to let me believe I was the problem. I was lost, she said, her voice shaking a little. I felt invisible, and he made me feel alive again. And what did I make you feel? I asked. Because I felt like I gave you everything I could. I worked hard. I kept the house in order. I asked you about your day even when I didn't feel like talking. I didn't disappear into someone else's bed when things got boring. She didn't answer that. She just sat there, chewing her lip, her hands twisting in her lap. I could tell she was struggling between defending herself and apologizing. But I wasn't interested in either anymore. I just wanted honesty, the kind that hurts because it doesn't come with excuses. Did you love him? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I thought I did, she said. But now I don't know. I think maybe I just loved not being your wife for a little while. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was probably the most honest thing she had said in weeks. I didn't respond right away. I just sat back in my chair and let the words sit in the air between us. So, what happens now? She finally asked, her voice lower. I've already talked to a lawyer, I said. The paperwork will be ready in a few days. You'll be served. It's amicable, no tricks, but I'm not negotiating on the terms. I keep the house. You keep your car and your savings account. I already split it down the middle. You're serious, she said, as if the rest of this had been a rehearsal. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. That part burned out a while ago. Now I'm just ready to move on. You wanted something different. Now you have it. I never wanted this, she said quietly. But you did, I said. You just didn't want to deal with the consequences. That's what this is. Not punishment. Just consequences. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at nothing. I stayed seated. I wasn't going to chase her around the room like some desperate guy in a bad drama. She turned back after a moment, tears in her eyes, but I didn't move. I don't know how we got here, she whispered. You stopped showing up, I said. That's how. We sat in silence for a long time after that. She didn't say she was sorry again. I think she knew it didn't matter anymore. We weren't two people working through a problem. We were two people acknowledging the end of a chapter. And for once, there was nothing left to say. The house felt different after she left. Not quieter or emptier, just different in a way that made it hard to sit still. I didn't throw away her things or change the locks immediately. I didn't go on some emotional cleaning spree or burn old photos. I just started using the space like it was mine again. I moved my clothes into the main closet. I took her mug out of the cabinet and put it in the box she left behind. I deleted her streaming profiles and logged out of the shared apps. It wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming the space I'd been renting in my own home. Friends started reaching out when they heard the news. Some offered to take me out. Some wanted to talk about what happened. I didn't give them the details. I didn't need to prove anything. People had opinions, of course. A few even hinted that maybe I was too cold about it all, that maybe I should have fought harder for the relationship. But no one ever really knows what goes on inside a marriage unless they're living in it. I didn't owe anyone a performance. I saw her once after everything was finalized. It was at the grocery store, of all places. She was in the produce section, looking at apples. She looked thinner, maybe more tired. When she saw me, she gave a small nod, the kind you give to someone you used to know well but no longer recognize. I nodded back, and we went our separate ways. There was no conversation, no attempt to reconnect. And that felt right. That moment told me we had both accepted it. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the lying. It was realizing how easily she had let go. Not just of me, but of us. The effort she didn't make. The conversations she avoided. The slow drift she never tried to stop. That was the part one kept turning over in my mind late at night when I couldn't sleep. Not the cheating, but the way she became someone else while still sleeping in the same bed. That kind of distance is harder to forget than anything physical. I started making small changes. Nothing dramatic, just things that made the space feel new. I painted the bedroom a different color. I replaced the rug in the hallway, the one she had hated. I rearranged the living room furniture. I started going to the gym more often, not to reinvent myself, but to fill time with something that didn't remind me of her. I read more. I cooked meals she never liked. I made plans without needing to check anyone else's calendar. It was lonely sometimes, sure, but it was mine. I didn't go looking for someone new. I wasn't interested in trying to prove that I could bounce back or fall in love again. I needed to be by myself for a while. I needed to learn how to sit in my own silence without feeling like I had lost something. People love to rush into something else when they get hurt, like replacing a broken chair before realizing they never liked sitting in it. I wasn't going to do that. I wanted to understand what I missed, what I ignored, what I allowed to happen just by keeping my head down. If I learned anything from this, it's that being steady isn't the same as being present. I thought that showing up every day, doing what needed to be done, being reliable, that all counted as love. And maybe it does. But it's not enough when the other person is drifting and you don't notice soon enough. Or worse, you notice and convince yourself it's just a phase. I had to face that part too, the part where I let it slide, where I accepted less because I didn't want to deal with the mess of confronting the truth. That's on me. One night, a few weeks after the papers were signed, I sat out on the back porch with a drink in my hand, just listening to the quiet. I thought about how many nights she had said she needed space, and how I gave it to her, thinking I was being supportive. I thought about how many signs I had brushed off because I didn't want to believe someone I loved could be so careless with me. And I thought about how all of it had led here, not to disaster, but to something honest. It was the end of something I had once valued, but it wasn't the end of me. I won't say I'm better off. That would be trying too hard. I'll just say I'm still here. I've got my name on the lease, food in the fridge, and a closet that's finally full of just my stuff. That's enough for now. I don't miss her. I don't want her back. And if she ever feels like reaching out, I hope she understands that what we had is gone, not because of the cheating, but because of the moment she chose herself and assumed I'd be waiting. I wasn't. Not anymore.